Joe Biden colluded with Hunter Biden, obstructing a congressional subpoena. This is now being admitted from the White House. Karine Jean-Pierre came out and said that Joe knew what Hunter was going to be doing. And so Hunter showed up, stood on the Senate side of the Capitol, did not go in and answer questions in violation of a lawful subpoena. We know that Joe has already said that people who don't comply with congressional subpoenas should be prosecuted. But what about people who collude to obstruct a congressional subpoena? Should they be a part of a conspiracy? Because that's interference with an official investigation, isn't it? Well, Jonathan Turley has a very nice article on that. We'll see what he says and how he unpacks it. But Karine is the person who brought this to our attention. She said specifically that Joe knew what Hunter was going to be doing. And does that mean that Joe is going to pardon Hunter? If Hunter comes out and falls on the sword, is he going to give him total get out of jail free pass? Okay, make this go away for me, son, and I'll make sure daddy takes care of you, just like I've been doing my whole life. Here's Karine acknowledging that maybe these two were in cahoots.
And everything else today, did he spend any time watching what his son had to say outside the Capitol?
Just a couple of things on that, and I want to be really clear. Look, as you know, Hunter Biden is a private citizen, and so I certainly would refer you to his representatives. Look, the president was certainly familiar with what his son was going to say.
Oh.
And I think what you saw was from
the
heart from his son. And you've heard me say this, you've heard the president say this. When it comes to the president and the first lady, they are proud of him continuing to rebuild his life. They are proud of their son.
Yeah, 53-year-old dude.
But I do want to say a couple of things here is that I think I can touch on is that the president is also focused on the important work of the American people. We just went back and forth about what's happening at the border and how he wants to make sure that we secure the border and the work that he and his team has been doing on negotiating to make sure that there's a bipartisan compromise.
Border's a disaster.
You saw him yesterday stand right next to President Zelensky. There could not have been a more powerful picture with the President of the United States standing next to President Zelensky, who he and the brave people in Ukraine are fighting for their democracy, right? And this is something that the president has led on, the world on, in making sure that President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine have what they need to beat against tyranny, to fight back against Russia's aggression. And, you know, you heard me at the beginning of this briefing talking about how he met with hostages who were held by Hamas and how emotional and impactful that meeting was. That was a two-hour meeting that he had with the family members. And it was important. He just convened, right, a meeting on infrastructure. So he's going to remain focused.
Not talking about anything.
Making sure that we continue to deliver for the American people. That's
obviously, the message that stood out there was that there was collusion. Said that they were proud of their son, but that the president was certainly familiar with what his son was going to say. He knew all about it. And I think what you saw was from the heart. So we're going to zoom in on that one. The president was certainly familiar with what his son was going to say. Well, Jonathan Turley wrote a piece about this, says they're busted, man. He says Hunter's contempt of Congress has wider consequences here. Now, obviously, Congress is absurd. We've got Jamal pulling fire alarms and so on. But Hunter got a subpoena and he was supposed to show up. He had two choices. He could have shown up or not. And obviously he didn't. He guaranteed by showing up on the Senate side of the Capitol that the House Sergeant at Arms did not pull him into a hearing room. And that would have been a real tough move. Yesterday, we were a little hard on Comer and Jordan for walking out of that press room or wherever they were at in Congress. Like, I don't know what just happened. They should have had the Sergeant at Arms standing there, flipping his handcuffs around, just like this. Come on over here, Hunter. What are you doing, bro? Come on over here. Come on, testify, man. Come step over this line, punk. But he didn't, right? Hunter made his little spectacle and then hurried on out of there. So ironically, that would have been a better option, but Shirley says he blew his raspberry. Anyways, many pundits immediately claim this was a clever move, but he disagrees. He says, you know, as I noted, there's no requirement for a formal vote. This subpoena was valid. It's only valid, you know, if they actually do something about it, like if Congress does something. He says, though, this is a great point. You know, it is precisely what then majority Democrats did when they impeached Trump. Now, it's not constitutionally required to hold a vote, but they did. In fact, the subpoena against Hunter involved 3 different authorities, and it is legitimate. Now, this was a spectacle, and Biden and his legal team committed another unforced error. But few people expected Hunter to testify. The evidence against him is overwhelming, as shown in the new federal indictment. He and his uncles were allegedly involved in a major scheme, and Hunter simply could have done what prior witnesses have done. Just gone in, taken the fifth. That's what former IRS official Lois Lerner did when Republicans were going after her. But now, Hunter can be held in contempt of Congress, and it's going to force the hand of Merrick Garland. Garland, as we covered the trial, went after Bannon, going after Navarro, and so now they're going to have to play a game. Now, there is another problem. This is the big one. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre she said that Biden was familiar with what the son was going to say, meaning that the president spoke with the son. Now, if that's true, that was a breathtaking mistake, says Turley. If they colluded with another, not good. One of the four most obvious potential articles of impeachment that he's laid out previously is about special treatment being given to Hunter, allowing felonies to expire, warnings about police raids, and so on. But if Biden has enlisted White House staff to actively push challenge accounts of his conduct and attack Republicans, that could be another abuse of power inquiry. So if this is true, if Biden was speaking with Hunty about committing a potential criminal act of contempt and advising him on that, then that could be a big problem. Hunter was refusing to give testimony focused not on his own role, but on his father's role, right? Hunter was talking about daddy. If daddy is going to tell son not to talk about daddy, that's a problem. The House can pursue evidence on that conversation and how the president may have supported his son's efforts. Now, this is bizarre, right? Hunter, he opened a new potential front for prosecution, and he really just angered them. Like, there's no doubt he just angered the DOJ, which is crazy because it's his dad's DOJ. If the same laws applied the same way that it was to Bannon, Hunter could find himself indicted immediately. Maybe they will. I doubt it. But in Bannon's case, the subpoena was issued at the end of September. He was indicted in November. Took 4 days. So if Biden himself maintained, President Biden himself has said that you can't deny subpoenas. So Karine is confirming that they did collude on this, says the president knew what this was about, and Hunter was supposed to testify about daddy. So Joe is obstructing. He's witness tampering right now as it stands. Here, this is what Karine said. White House claims no evidence exists against the wrongdoing guy. Here's Karine, John Deere.
The impeachment inquiry, House of Representatives voted last night to formally authorize the impeachment inquiry that started in September. For a lot of people at home who only view this in very broad strokes, could you explain to people why the president interacted with so many of his relatives or associates, and why he continues to deny any interaction? How should people think about this?
Well, let's be very clear here. And I talked about this yesterday, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. And the president put out a statement yesterday that was very clear. It's, what we're seeing from House Republicans is wasted time.
Okay.
And it is certainly, baseless political stunt. That's what we're seeing. And they're leaving. House Republicans are leaving this week to go, enjoy a nice holiday, right? As most Americans should. But what happened to the funding to Ukraine? You just asked me about Ukraine. They haven't been able to get that done. They haven't been able to help us fix what's going on at the border. They haven't been able to get that done. They haven't been able to start a conversation on how we're going to avert a shutdown in January. They haven't been able to do that. And so, look, there's been zero evidence. You can ask me about engagement and what the president has done with his family in conversation, but there's no evidence. There is no evidence that the president has done wrongdoing. There's none. Absolutely none. None. And that is just a fact. You've heard it from Republicans themselves. So they're wasting their time. Instead of doing the work on behalf of the American people, they go after the president's family. But that's a waste of time.
All right, so that's our Karine Deere tractor, basically both making the same sounds, bunch of noise, vroom, 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 in the White House. Not much going on there, and so that is what they talk about. Now, James Comer came out responding to this after the House formalized the impeachment inquiry. Here is what he sounded like. We have a couple clips from Comer. They were trying to get their messaging in order, and here is what he said after the situation with Hunter broke down. Says that the House has now voted to formalize an official inquiry, and we are getting to business.
That means we have a lot more standing in court when we go to court to get people to comply with our subpoenas. We also have a lot of information requested from various administrative agencies and offices. They have obstructed our investigation. They have not complied with our request, and this gives us a greater standing in court. So we expect to get information quicker. We expect to post people quicker now. So this was a very positive step forward in our investigation.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. What did you make of Hunter's performance today? And just your update there.
Well, I mean, look, this guy's been given special treatment his entire life. I've never seen such a performance that was full of entitlement and arrogance as that.
It's true.
I mean, he just defied a congressional subpoena. We've heard the videos of where his dad said that people should be held accountable for defying a congressional subpoena. The media would go on and on about anyone that wouldn't comply with a congressional subpoena. They should be locked up. A lot of media sources would write.
They charge them with
crimes. It'll be
crimes.
interesting to see what the headlines in the papers say tomorrow. Look, look, we're not going to give Hunter Biden special treatment. We're not going to treat him any better or worse than any other witness. He's a key witness in a major investigation of public corruption at the highest levels. We have been very transparent. We've been very meticulous in this investigation. We're now in the deposition phase. We gave him a lawful subpoena, and we expect him to come before the House Oversight Committee and be deposed.
He does not want to do that. Like I said, he got a pretty big gift as far as these charges. And I want to talk about that for a second. Last week, you joined Jake Tapper on CNN, an interview that really irritated me. You alleged something that I feel is pretty obvious, that the federal tax charges against Hunter Biden coming just days before he was scheduled to be deposed are very likely a political maneuver to give Hunter cover so he doesn't have to lie under oath when he is asked about the influence peddling scheme and how involved Joe Biden really was. Very obvious when you think about how the DOJ really works, especially when it comes to the Bidens, when you think about what the whistleblowers have told us. Here is how that went.
Well, that's a good point because the DOJ has already done that, by the way, right? They've already given him, they tried to not charge him, then they gave him a diversion deal. Now they're just like ramping this up a little bit. So they've already got a pattern of 3 attempts essentially to cover this up. And why wouldn't they do it again? So they're going to walk through the Jake Tapper interview. We'll fast forward through that. But here is what the White House says about this. This guy's Ian Sams. He is the White House counsel press person who comes out and gives talking points, the spokesman. Here is what he said on CNN when he was explaining the Republicans and their impeachment inquiry is mostly meaningless, not following the proper process.
Well, there's a process you're supposed to follow in congressional oversight, and these guys just haven't followed it. They've blazed right through. We've offered over and over and over again throughout this Congress to meet with them, to talk with them, to hear about any legitimate informational needs that they may have. And time again, they've ghosted us. They don't respond to questions that we have for them. They don't reach out to have meetings. So they've just blazed through this process. And there's a reason why. The reason why is that this is a preordained outcome. Don't forget, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who right now is probably the most powerful member of the House Republican Conference, introduced articles of impeachment on day 1 of Joe Biden's presidency, before he could even be the president, do anything. They've decided from the moment that he took office that they were going to impeach him, and this is a natural continuation of that process. And now what they've done is wasted millions and millions of taxpayer dollars on a fishing expedition trying to drum up an excuse for it. So
millions of dollars of wasted money. That's our fiscally conservative White House counsel spokesman. They're not concerned about all of their insane investigations that sprawled all across America for the last 3 years going after protesters, but they're going to say that what the Republicans are doing by investigating Joe and Hunter, which has mounds of criminality, all that's just a waste of money. I think that's actually good money. We don't want corrupt bureaucrats in charge of Washington, even though we got a lot of them. Here's Schumer, one example of them, saying that this is a clown car impeachment proceeding. Here is what Schumer sounded like in the Senate. They're upset about this.
The Senate's bipartisan package of the defense bill stands in glaring contrast with the partisan race to the bottom we're seeing in the House. Just look at the difference between these two bodies. While the Senate is strengthening America's national security, House Republicans are wasting time on a clown car impeachment inquiry that will get nowhere. The House Republican impeachment inquiry is the definition of unserious. The House should be looking at the Senate right now for an example of how both sides can work together in a meaningful way to pass serious legislation to improve the lives of the American people.
Oh, gosh. They just passed the NDAA, another $900 billion of garbage. Plus, it guts our rights again by extending FISA. It's all just a joke. So there is too much uniformity in Washington, right? When there is something they really want to get through that the intelligence agencies want, they get it through. And of course, they did that today, much to our detriment. And a lot of Republicans voted for that as well. We got Jeffries coming up. He's saying, you can't impeach a president's son. We're not trying to do that. Definitely trying to impeach Hunty. Here's what he says.
To answer the question, isn't this, some people would say it's a double standard. So if this hits the House floor, are you voting no on contempt?
That would be correct.
Isn't it
that would be correct.
Standard, then?
Yeah.
If this goes to the House floor, you're going to vote no on contempt, even though you guys voted yes to hold others in contempt? What are you going to do here? It sounds like a double standard. Great question.
Listen, the so-called investigation underway by House Republicans is a joke. It's embarrassing.
So if Republicans say that, like if Steve Bannon said, this is a joke, this is embarrassing, does that mean he doesn't get indicted? Is that how that works?
There is no evidence that President Biden broke the law. This is an impeachment inquiry of the president. You can't impeach the president's son.
No, but you can investigate.
There is no evidence that President Joe Biden broke the law. There's no evidence that President Joe Biden committed an impeachable offense. There is no evidence that President Biden engaged in any wrongdoing. This has been an ongoing investigation, understand, from the very beginning. beginning, on January 3rd, when they couldn't get their act together, 15 different dysfunctional votes before they caved to the extremists. From the very beginning of this Congress, they've been after President Joe Biden, and they want to try to get to him in any way possible, including targeting President Biden's family. No evidence in January, no evidence in February, no evidence in March, no evidence in April, no evidence.
All right, you get it. There's plenty of evidence. They just keep saying it over and over and over. And you're going to see it. It's a talking point. It's a strategy. They just say it doesn't exist. Like it's a lie. Like it's just an outright lie. They've just decided we're going to lie to you. There's tons of evidence. Obviously, we've seen it here, show after show, but they just say it doesn't exist and they're cowards and liars, right? That's how you kind of know that they're a little bit nervous about this.
They're always there when you don't need them. But when there's actually something of consequence, they cave. They spent years, and particularly this year, investigating Joe Biden. They came up with nothing, and they admitted as much. So now they're going to have a formal impeachment inquiry so they can find even more of nothing. They don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what crimes they even want to suggest Joe Biden committed.
Bribery.
All they do know is Donald Trump wants this.
Obstruction.
Donald Trump needs this. Donald Trump is going to make their life difficult if they don't give it to him. Those moderate Republicans don't want Donald Trump coming after them and ginning up a primary against them. And so they're going to do this to dilute the stain of his former impeachments, to gratify their master in Mar-a-Lago.
Dilute the stains of his former impeachment, right? So yeah, everybody's going to be impeaching everybody now, right? Republicans are going to impeach them. You guys impeached Trump twice. Guess what happens after the fact? We're going to have indictments? So maybe Trump will also do some indictments. Maybe nervous about that. We got one final one before we jump into the Republicans. Here's Swalwell. Now he was there with Hunter on the day of his little speech defending him. And it's weird to watch the guy who made bang bang with a Chinese spy called Fang Fang, why he's out there with Hunter. I don't know. Were they making bang bang with Chinese spies together? I don't know.
They said multiple times he could testify publicly or privately, and he said he wanted to testify publicly, so he showed up.
Okay, that is the most smooth brain answer ever. Okay, this guy's a congressman. Would he have given that same standard to Bannon and everybody on the January 6th committee? Obviously not.
Answer any of our questions. He said he wanted it to be in public with cameras there, but we tried to ask him questions. He didn't say anything. So what do you think he's afraid of, or what do you think he's hiding? Why?
Yeah, Eric.
I don't know what James Comer is afraid of, because he said Hunter could testify publicly. Hunter showed up publicly, and then Comer no longer wanted him publicly.
That's the Congressional, I'm not that, you are, right? I'm not a doo-doo head, you are. That's our congressman, Swalwell. Unbelievable. Genius, okay? Those are the people who are in charge. All right. So here are the Republicans. Byron Donald is also saying that there is not any time for immunity for Hunter. Okay, we're not going to tolerate it. Here's what Donald says.
And look, and I will say with respect to Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, they were White House officials. There is a clear argument that they were protected by executive privilege under the Trump administration. Hunter Biden's not a part of any administration. There is no executive privilege that protects him from coming to Congress and sitting for a deposition because he's been subpoenaed to do so. But Larry, at the end of the day, the reason why Hunter is running, the reason why the White House is obfuscating, the reason why House Democrats are pounding the table because they don't have the facts is because the Biden family has been complicit in a foreign corruption scheme. Joe Biden knew about it. Joe Biden took money from it. And I believe that Joe Biden is a co-conspirator in violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, an act, by the way, that has thrown other officials in jail. Yeah. Paul Manafort, the one that is most famous that comes to mind, for less violations than what Hunter Biden is accused of.
All right, so we've got Byron Donalds. James Comer also came out and gave us an update. Here is what he says, talking about Hunter must comply, and we are moving forward. We expect you at the White House to comply with our requests.
We've made our point very clear today. Evidence uncovered has shown a very disturbing trend by the Biden family. We've spent months in this investigation accumulating evidence. We have a simple question that I think an overwhelming majority of Americans have. What did the Bidens do to receive the tens of millions of dollars from our enemies around the world? Today's unanimous vote, our conference, showed that we are united as a conference. We expect to have people honor our subpoenas. We want to wrap this investigation up, but obviously you get to the deposition phase before you wrap up an investigation. So that's where we are. We're very pleased with the vote today. I think that sent a message loud and clear to the White House. We expect you to comply with our information requests and our subpoenas.
Well, Well, they're not going to do it, James. All right, so what are they going to do? Here is what Jim Jordan has been talking about, saying that one of Hunter's prosecutors is going to come and testify. Here was Jordan recently.
Guys, call for number one. Assistant U.S. Attorney for the DOJ out of Wilmington, Delaware, part of the...
Leslie Wolf, one of the key investigators, is no longer with the DOJ. She is out, and I posted an X about this saying it is fleeing the crime scene, right? She doesn't want to be there anymore, and apparently she is gone.
Well, I think it was the whole investigation, as you pointed out, Bill. It took him 5 years. It's still ongoing now. It's now a special counsel. David Weiss been named special counsel. But Leslie Wolf, according to Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, is the lady who said we're not going to look into campaign finance concerns that Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, and others of the investigative team thought should be examined. She's the one who said you can't use the term big guy when you do any interviews. You can't talk about political figure number one, who we all know was Joe Biden. So we want to ask her questions about all that. And maybe most importantly, why the investigation decided to let the tax years 2014, 2015, when the bulk of the Burisma income was coming into Hunter Biden, why they let the statute of limitations lapse for those years. My theory is when you get into Burisma, you get to the White House. I mean, it's one thing to charge Hunter Biden on a gun charge in Delaware. That doesn't involve Joe Biden. But you get into Burisma, it does, because this is a Ukrainian energy company that paid Hunter Biden so much money. So we want to ask her some questions about that as well.
And then what will happen to that testimony? I think there was a little bit of confusion yesterday about what Hunter Biden said he was coming to do or not. So this is a closed-door deposition, but will you be able to release a transcript of that, or do you hold that?
You hold those transcripts. We will release them at some point, but you don't want to release it until you've interviewed everyone else, because you release it, there's sort of a template that the next witness who you want to bring in has for what questions are coming. So typical investigations, you do these depositions behind closed doors. There's a transcript obviously developed, and then at some point you release the transcript, you do a report, but in an impeachment inquiry, there will be some kind of report obviously at some point if we decide to move to articles of impeachment.
You mentioned these years, 2014 and 2015. Do you consider those to be the most serious charges?
Yeah, because I think the theory of this case is, I think it's an old story. You got a politician who does certain things, those actions benefit his family financially, and then there's an effort to conceal it. Yeah, I think the effort to cover it up and conceal it was, the way David Weiss and Leslie Wolf handled this investigation. But if you really go back to the start, it's Hunter Biden's involvement with Burisma. I say this all the time. There are 4 fundamental facts here. Fact number 1, Hunter Biden gets put on the board. Fact number 2, he's not qualified to be on the board of Burisma, this Ukrainian energy company. He said so himself. Fact number 3, the executives at Burisma asked Hunter Biden, weigh in with your father, help us with the pressure we are under from the prosecutor. Key fact number 4 is Joe Biden goes to Ukraine just 3 days after he gets that request and conditions the funding of Ukraine that's already been approved on the firing of that very prosecutor who's applying the pressure to the company that Hunter Biden sits on the board of. Those facts are, I think, clear as could be, and that is sort of the pattern. This is when it's all started. And then you have the actions, of course, with David Weiss and the Justice Department and how they left those key tax years out of any charging, even though Mr. Ziegler, Mr. Shapley, and the rest of the investigative team thought they should have been charged.
And they arguably covered it up. Leslie Wolf is fleeing the scene of the crime, and we know that the whistleblowers have mounds of problems with the investigation, saying that they raised flags multiple times. They were stonewalled. Different investigatory avenues were rejected. They wanted to go and search a storage unit, for example, and Leslie Wolf tipped off Hunter's defense team, and so now that begs the question about obstruction and more collusion. What else did Joe Biden do? What else did he know? And what level of involvement did he have with Hunter, especially recently, and at least with this little press conference and deposition? Snub, we want to get to the bottom of it. Congress looks like they're going to continue to investigate it. We're going to follow along as well, my friends. And so thank you for subscribing to our channel wherever it is you're watching this. Thanks for visiting robertgovea.com to sign up for our daily newsletter. That way, if you see any stories that you want to forward to a friend or family member, easy to do it. We've also got our brand new shop at robertgovea.com, where we've got our newest gear, our Watcher hat, our Hillary Clinton flip-flopping Hillary sandals, and more at robertgovea.com/shop. Thanks for grabbing something for the holidays. Thanks for supporting the show and wearing your swag out there, my friends. We'll look forward to seeing you back here on the next one.